thyself is to love thyself, is to examine, observe, and respect thyself. It's an ongoing process, never to be explained in a brief synopsis. It's a preoccupation with reflection and revelation that can only be achieved through discipline and determination.
Hello and welcome to the Encouraging Word Show. I am Jamila Freelain, your host, and I'm telling you, I have a really exciting guest today. I've got some really exciting information. Now, you know I usually focus on students and parents. Well, today is all about the parents, and I wanted to do the show today and dedicate it to the parents because I get so many questions oftentimes from parents. Maybe they're looking at going back to school, maybe they're in transition themselves and thinking about how to kind of make it maybe back into the job market after they've been out for so many years. So I brought, of course, nothing but the best, and I have an expert here today. I have Miss Pamela Lue-Hing with me today, and I wanted to say thank you for coming.
I am so glad to be here.
And we're glad to have you, definitely. So let's jump right in. Tell me a little bit about what it is that you do. Now, you guys can see there on the screen, she's got a lot of bullet points by her name. She is an author, she's a transformational speaker, and she's also an entrepreneur. I'm going to add something else to that list too. That's community leader, I would say. Now, tell me, with those different bullet points, tell me a little bit about each one of those. So, as a transformational speaker, what exactly does that mean?
That means that I help people see beyond what's in front of them, to really dig into their purpose and become the best that they can possibly be.
Okay.
And really dig into their purpose and what God called them to do.
Okay. And how are you able to do that?
So I work with clients one-on-one, and I do group coaching as well. And we talk about, there's several different levels to that, okay? First of all, we begin with their past. We talk about their past and some of those things that they really enjoy doing, some of those things that they're really gifted at. And then we transition that to what are they passionate about?
Okay.
Right? And what do they really feel that they're called to do? And so we kind of marry the two, because some people don't even realize what they're called to do, and they really are searching for their purpose. And so we dig deep to find their purpose.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's great. Now, are you able to do that primarily in workshops, or how do you kind of cultivate that? Because I know you mentioned you do one-on-one, and you also work with groups, but let's say, for example, if I was to work with you and we were trying to uncover maybe what my passion is, how would you go about doing that, or what are some resources that you provide in order to how should I say, in order to nurture that?
To nurture that. Well, I do provide workshops as well. Discovering your purpose and moving beyond where you are to be where you want to be. And so I do workshops. One of the tasks that I give to my clients and to my workshop participants is to outline their life as far back as they can think, of the things, the types of activities that they did growing up. For instance, I started selling lemonade as a little girl in my mother's driveway.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that was my very first entrepreneurial adventure. And I went from that to selling credit cards over the telephone when I was a teenager in high school.
Wow. Okay. So that already kind of
exactly
gave you some inkling.
Right. And so I said, okay, I really enjoy this concept of making money and owning my own business, right?
Yes.
And so in sales. So I've been in sales for over 35 years now. And so that I began to, again, when you look at what you've done in your past and you trace your steps, the answer is already there.
True.
Love working with people, and so that's what I advise a lot of my clients to do, to really track where you've been.
Okay. Now, is there some type of opening question that you start with people that are working with you, or is there a set activity? I know you mentioned you have them to look at their past or outline their past. What kind of advice would you give them, like if there was a 2 or 3 steps that or pointers that you would normally give?
So once they have journaled their past and they really see, you look for some common denominators.
Okay.
Some things that really resonate with you, right? And so number one, you have to look at your past. And then number 2, you assess where you are currently. And in assessing where you are currently, you want to take a look at 7 different areas of your life.
Oh, wow.
There's the mind, body, and the soul.
Okay.
Right?
And 7, so that's deep.
And there's 7, so it's deep. It's 7 layers deep. And so when we look at it, I know you asked for 3, but this is what I talk about in my workshops. And so to look at the mind, what you want to do is you want to look at where you are in terms of your intelligence, what are you doing to feed the mind? What are you doing to study, right? And then you want to look at your emotion, okay? That is all tied to the mind.
Wow.
Right? And then you want to also then look at where you are financially. Because that,
of course,
right?
Because that plays a part.
That plays a big part. So that's the mind. And then the body, you want to look at your social. You know, how are you connecting with people? What types of groups do you belong to? What types of organizations do you belong to?
Right.
To feed you and allow you to connect and allow you to really build that purpose, right? And so then the physical, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? And that's a big one. And I really, especially over the last few months, I've been experiencing some things. And so you realize more and more, the more mature we become, the more important it is, right, to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Physically.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, spiritually. You know, where are we spiritually?
Okay, and you do have to be connected to a higher source.
Yes, and everyone believes in something, but what is it that you believe in, and then do you study it? Do you walk it? Do you talk it? Are you that same person that you read about in terms of the spirituality, in terms of the principles of that spirituality? Do you own it?
Okay. Wow. I could see why you would be considered a transformational speaker. Okay, that's wonderful. Now, of course, you saw those bullets there that were on that screen earlier. You spoke on, how you uncovered some of those 7 layers and go deep with that. Tell me a little bit about this book here, because this is what made me think of you when I spoke to a few parents just recently. And some of them, again, were in transition. And one in particular had been laid off, and I thought about your job as a transformational speaker and your book, and then of course I thought about the book cover as well because I knew the young lady who designed the cover. So I was like, I definitely need to have Pamela on the show and to talk about what inspired this book and what are some of the, maybe if you can give 1 or 2 golden nuggets for that person who's watching who may be looking at going back to school or in transition.
Excellent. So my book, Pink Slip to Powerhouse, came to be when I was downsized three times.
Okay.
And so
wow.
After being downsized 3 times, I had to find out what is it that I'm called to do here, because obviously working for someone else is not working. And so I began to journal that experience, and that's how my book was born, right? And so the whole concept of the premise behind the book is that it's 3 sections. And so the first section is, I've lost my job, now what? When anyone goes through that type of transition, it really is a grieving process. And
definitely.
So it's a loss, whether, of course, you're going through any loss in life, whether that's divorce, whether it's a death, whether it's a loss of job, transition, any transition that's huge. And so you have to allow yourself to go through the process. And so if there's anyone out there who is going through and you are challenged with something, I encourage you to allow yourself to go through the process. That process may mean that you may be angry one moment, you may be very sad the next moment, and then you may feel lost in the next moment. But allow yourself to embrace those moments and then journal. I always encourage my clients to journal.
And that's something I've actually got to get better at doing.
Yeah, journaling is really, it's therapeutic. And so the more that you journal and you're able to get your thoughts out on paper, I also encourage my clients to journal things that you feel good about as well every day. Count your blessings every day. Because all too often we may look at what's wrong, but let's start looking at what's right. What's
Gratitude
right about
is important.
Gratitude
For happiness, yes.
That's it. And so we've got to show ourselves every day. We've got to read those words of what's happening great. It might be that the sun is shining outside. It might be that your daughter or son came home with a great grade. Let's celebrate those moments. And so once you move from that, so the first part of the book was I lost my job, now what? The second part is moving from employee to employer. So realizing that any transition that you go through, you have to transform your mind. You have to understand what you're getting into, and you really got to study to show yourself approved,
Yes.
right? And then the third is powerhouse in motion. That means that now that you've owned it, you've studied it, then you become it and you walk it out.
Okay. So those are definitely some powerful steps that you bring to the forefront. And I appreciate you sharing that. And even more than me, I know that there's someone watching at home and somebody maybe that's watching online or on their mobile device and thinking to themselves, you know, she's absolutely right. You know, people recognize different things and different ways. There are different ways that people respond to what they hear, and I think what you've shared is something that will resonate with a lot of the parents that I've come across. Now, something else that I mentioned is, of course, you're a community leader as well. You do a lot of things in the community, and you work with a great organization as well. Tell me a little bit about some of the work that you've done with young people as it relates to college and career planning.
Career planning. So I work with the Young Black Leadership Alliance, and I've been with them since 2006 as a parent. I started out as a parent, and my son was in high school, and their mission resonated with me and where I saw my son going, and that is becoming a young leader. And we look at our leaders there. We work with the high achieving high school students, 9th through 12th grade, both male and female. And it's a leadership development program. We also focus on service, and we build leaders, essentially, is what we do.
Wonderful, wonderful. Another thing, is I know when I used to go to some of the luncheons that were held by the commissioner, you were involved with that, with small businesses as well. So it's like, she's all over the place. I tell you. What was it that I don't remember what the exact title or role was that you served at that time, but.
So I was the moderator for Commissioner League Small Business Consortium meetings, and I did that for 7 years with Commissioner.
Wow.
And so we started back in 2011, and when I met with her back in 2011, we had very small groups that would get together, and it was Commissioner's baby, as we call it. And she wanted to make sure that businesses had everything that they needed to succeed, minority business, I should say small businesses. And so she would have the powers that be from the county and the city come and would meet with the business owners.
Of course.
And it was a very small meeting at that time, maybe 8 to 10 people.
Oh,
and
okay.
what I do as a strategic planner, I help to build that out.
Right.
And so we created a focus for that, and then we had a threefold focus, which is still going strong today.
Wonderful.
And that is, number one, how do I become certified to take advantage of the contracts with the county and the city? The second is building collaborations and partnerships.
Of course.
And then the third, of course, is education, business development education. And so at the meetings, they still have them, and LaPronda Span, who's doing a phenomenal job.
And I love her. She's
wonderful. Incredible, and she's taken it to a whole nother level. And so I handed the baton off on last June, I think it was June of last year. And she has taken it to a whole nother level, and so I'm so excited to see what she's doing with the small businesses and helping grow. And so now we went from 8 to 10 back in 2011 to well over probably 80 to 100 people who come every single
that's magnificent.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
so
exciting. That's really exciting. Now, of course, the name of the show is Encouraging Word Show, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is one word, if you could think of, to describe you and the work that you do, that encompasses what you convey in your book, what you try to, convey in your workshops, and even in your work as a community leader?
It would be resilience. Resilience, okay. Yes. We must train our mind to see beyond what's in front of us and look beyond what's in front of us and train our mind to seize each moment. So what you see is not really what it is. What you see is what could be. So you have to condition your mind to see what the possibilities are. And you have to have faith and believe and work toward that end to look at the possibilities. So if that makes sense.
It does. It does. It makes me think of the definition of faith, which is the things unseen, or the evidence of things unseen. So wonderful. Okay. Now, when I think of today's show, and when I think of all of the things that you've shared with us, I think the word passion, because you're kind of teaching us to be a little more introspective and identify what it is that we're most gifted at and what it is that we feel most strongly about, and then to use that as basically a reference point and a starting point to build on for whatever that next chapter is, whether it's for you to continue on and go to school for maybe a license that you want to get, or if you have always had the desire to acquire a degree in a certain area, that sort of thing. But it really starts internally, as you've mentioned. Once you're spiritually connected, once you've maybe done some journaling and just done a lot of positive internal dialogue, and even thought about the things you were grateful for. All of that is a recipe for success and tapping into what's going to take you to the next level and where you want to be and where God has wants to position you to be as well. I want to say thank you for coming on today. It's definitely been a pleasure. Was there any last words? Actually, one last word I do want to share is how can people meet or come across you? I believe I do have your contact information there on the slide that they'll see in front of them. But verbally, yes, because we are on some podcast things as well, on some recordings. So how can people reach out to you?
So PamelaLue-Hing.com. That's PamelaLuehing.com.
Okay. Well, we thank you again. And just so people know what the cover looks like, because I know Stephanie, and I'm very proud of her. Now, is this something that goes with the book? Is this like a workbook and a whole course or series?
It is. It is. So we have the book. We have the workbook, the company workbook.
Okay. So you got several things. Okay.
And then a journal, and then a book of quotes as well.
Great.
You're holding this 3-set CD with me reading the book on CD, just
wonderful.
in case people would rather listen.
Okay, and I know Audible and all of those different means now are very, very popular. So, okay, wonderful. Well, we thank you again for being here. We want to thank you for watching, and make sure you stay tuned. The second half of the show, I've got a few pointers and tips for those of you looking to go back to school. Don't miss it. We're back. Now, if you saw the first part of this episode, you definitely know that was a lot of great information that we shared. And of course, whenever I have somebody as phenomenal as this young lady, I try to see if they can stay as well. Well, she was gracious enough to be able to stay. And so as I give these last few tips that I want to share with you parents that are looking at maybe going back to school or making their change or transitions, I wanted to share with you some tips, and then I wanted to have some insight and some wisdom from Pamela to interject as well. So I'm glad that you were able to stay on.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, no problem. So real quick, as we talk about making the transition and making the decision to maybe change jobs, or for example in the case of like what inspired that book, maybe being laid off and having to start from scratch really, what I did was incorporate some tips based on students and parents that I've met who are in that position, and just to kind of help prepare. So tip number one that I would suggest when you're going through that particular change is to make sure you've got your support team lined up. And what I mean by that is you need to have your Amen corner lined up. School is another level of difficulty, and as we know, life is challenging enough as it is. So when you encounter the regular life challenges, and then you've got maybe a 20-page paper on top of that, and you got to cook when you get home, and maybe you got out of class at 8:45. I mean, that's a lot to handle, right? So you've got to have some things in place, and a support team is key and number one. And with that support team, that could look like anything from getting someone to assist you, or looking at lining up maybe evening childcare, that sort of thing. It may mean speaking with your supervisor if you work at if you have a very accommodating employer, and seeing if maybe some of your hours could get adjusted. Maybe you have classes on certain days and you need to come in a little early and leave a little early. Can you speak to that as well?
when you mention support team, that is critical. It really is. And I'd like to suggest what an acronym. I call it PBAOTC, and that's PBAOTC. The P is for people, and that speaks to the support team. Making sure that you also have friends around you that support you, not just your amen corner. They're your amen corner, but they also tell you the truth.
Okay.
Right?
You don't want yes people.
You don't want the yes people. You do want those people who challenge you to be your best.
Of course.
And then the B is for behavior, and then A is for attitude. So always checking yourself and those friends around you and the family around you who can help you monitor or engage your attitude toward your situation. Because a lot of times when we're going through transitions, there are a lot of challenges that come.
Absolutely.
And we've got to be mindful of what we say to ourselves and how we're thinking. And so that support team is very important. And the O is for organizations and other support. It may be in the community. Perhaps you're going to need some assistance with, like you said, with your children, with perhaps even studying. If it's been a while since you've been out of school and you need to seek some assistance, maybe tutoring. So what type of organizations or associations might you need to connect yourself with to align with your goal? And then, of course, there are things. What types of things do you need to do? Do you need to maybe situate your home in a different way, maybe for your study time, right? And maybe you need to have more of a quiet time. And then circumstances. Always remembering your why. Why is it that I am going back to school? What is it that I want to accomplish?
Oh gosh, yes. Your why is critical.
It's critical.
Because if it's not deeply rooted, the least little distraction will have you off in left field.
That's it.
Study. Why study?
Right.
But I heard so-and-so was coming to town. I got to check out this concert. I got to do this over here. I got to do...
And Anita Baker's coming on the 7th, so yes.
Enough said. I won't be studying that day. Make a mental note. So, perfect example. And again, that's important because sometimes you just don't know to kind of have those things off as a checklist. And I love that acronym that you had. It's kind of quick, fast, and allows people to have something to reference before they maybe make that change or jump going back to school or training. Now, the second step for those of you that are thinking about, again, making that move, maybe getting that license, getting that degree, thinking about going to school, is to think about the delivery method that works best for you. Pamela, you mentioned if it's been a while since you've been in school. What I would always mention as a go-to thing when I was working as an advisor is to keep in mind that if technology is not your friend, if you haven't maybe maneuvered around with just the basics with Windows, that sort of thing, starting off as an online student may not be the best option. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take some online classes maybe down the road once you build a little more familiarity and kind of learn to navigate your way around. But you don't want to start off being frustrated. So an online class can be a great method in terms of ease and availability and convenience. But it can be extremely frustrating if you haven't been in a school setting in a while, and if you are a person who's not a self-starter. And let's face it, everybody is on the spectrum in terms of their learning styles. Some people can get up in the morning, first thing in the morning, they're ready to go, and they're doing their assignments maybe before work. There are other people who are night owls, and that's the time that works best for them. So you kind of got to know what works best for you in terms of that delivery style. Is it going to be on site? Is it going to be online? Or maybe there's a hybrid class that you can take where it kind of reinforces the things that you've learned by being in class, but you're able to learn independently at home for the sake of convenience and that sort of thing. But again, having a portion of that class taught on site can reinforce some of those things that you've learned and can help because you have somebody else to bounce ideas off in the classroom circumstance or in the classroom situation. Did you have something to interject there?
Study groups.
Study groups are a good idea, very good idea.
Making sure that you form those study groups.
And you need to study with those that are, again, on the trajectory that you're on too. If you're with that study group that likes to kick it and you play music and cards, it's not really a study group. That's a card playing group. That's something different. And cards are fine, however, So study groups, I think that's a great thing to interject.
Productive.
A productive study group. Okay, let's put productive in front of there. Okay.
Yes. Intentional study groups.
Yes. Strategic and intentional study groups that are aiming for the top. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the final piece that we want to take a look at is duration. And whether, again, it's a degree that you're looking at, a certificate, a diploma, some type of professional licensing, because everybody has a variety of different career objectives and goals. You want to think about the time investment that you have to put in. And then, too, you want to think about as I always say, the return on investment. If you're looking to spend, let's say it's $30,000, especially if you're an adult and maybe if you're the sole breadwinner or what have you, you really got to think about the amount of money that's going into that training that you're going to get versus what is going to be the outcome. How much of a shift will you see in your income as a result of that investment on the front end? Very key, very critical. Did you have something to add to that maybe?
Return on investment, not just with your scholastically or academically, but in every area of your life.
Oh, very true.
As you're moving forward, looking at where you spend your time and taking an account of that, and how you spend your time.
Right.
And making sure that it aligns with the goals that you set for yourself.
Absolutely true. I always say, where you spend show me where you spend your time, show me where you spend your money, and I'll show you what you value. Very, very critical. If you want to be able to refocus or redirect or train your mind and to focus it on going back to school or going back again to get that licensing or that professional certification, whatever it may be, you've really got to be on point, and you really have to know, again, how to focus, but also analyze if it's going to be worth that investment as well. You don't want to sacrifice maybe this time away from your family and put all that time, effort, energy, blood, sweat, tears into getting whatever this piece of paper is, only for it to be not a high yield on the back end. So definitely duration is something you want to consider. Is it going to be maybe an accelerated program? Is it something that maybe only requires you to take a couple classes, maybe a few nights during the week? Is it something that's 6 weeks long? Is it a week long? Is it a weekend seminar that you can attend and get this certificate or whatever it may be? You got to look at all of those different things so that, again, at the end, you make sure that it's worth your while and it gets you closer to the finish line. You have a goal in mind, and you want to make sure that you accomplish that goal. And the best way to reach a goal is to make sure you set forth a plan. Now, with those people that are in transition and change, a lot of times, and we mentioned this, we touched on this in the first part of the show, you can go through a lot of psychological challenges as well. Can you speak to that?
I think all of us can readily identify with this thing called stress. And the thing called stress really is quite an interesting, how can I say, it can be quite an interesting beast. I think that's probably an appropriate way to put that, right? And so when you're thinking about going back to school and you're going through transitions, and I shared that earlier about your mind, body, and soul, right?
Yes.
And I think I was remiss in not sharing the psychological component to that, because that's very important. How we process information, and so many people are ashamed to say that they're depressed, and they might say, I don't like being around people. How do you know when you're depressed? I don't like to be around people. I want to go in my house. I want to close the door. I don't want to talk to anybody, right? Those are some indicators.
It is articulated as, I don't feel like being bothered, where that's really kind of sometimes a cover for
depression.
That.
Depression.
Wow.
And depression comes in so many different forms, and some people are depressed and they need medication, and it's okay. It is okay. But yet, so many of us just need someone to talk to. So finding that someone to talk to. And I always say, before you begin to pile anything else on your plate, that will depress you further, because you can't keep up with the demand, because your mind just is not there.
You'll be overwhelmed.
You're overwhelmed. And so making sure that you're ready to take it on. Whatever that transition might be, that you're ready and that your mind is in a good place. especially if you have children, it's so very important that we make sure that our psychologically that we're sound, because our children feed off of us.
Right, and you got to be sound for both yourself and you got to be sound for them as well. Now we're actually just about out of time, so I want to end with a quick quote that I thought was so powerful.
Yes.
And I appreciate you being here as a guest for today. And this last quote I want to end with on the Encouraging Word Show is, of course, brought to us via Pamela Lue-Hing, and it says, "Train your eyes to look beyond what's in front of you and discipline your mind to seize each moment." I want to thank you for watching the Encouraging Word Show. I want to thank my guest Pamela Lue-Hing for being here today and sharing with you all some encouraging words. I really appreciate you coming. Hope we'll have you back one day. And thank you for watching.